Emma Patel had been making cold calls at Cosmic Communications for 2 years, and she'd learned that rejection sounded the same in every language. Whether it was a hurried, not interested from a human businessman, or the harmonic dismissal of a Rigellian trader, the fundamental message was always identical. Nobody wanted to talk to a telemarketer. But the call that changed everything started with what should have been a routine wrong number. "Good morning," Emma said into her headset, reading from the script she'd memorized so completely she could recite it while thinking about grocery lists. "This is Emma from Cosmic Communications, calling about our premium Interstellar data packages. Am I speaking with Dr. Marcus Chun?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, not the usual dead silence that indicated a disconnected call, but a thoughtful pause that suggested someone was actually listening. "I am not Dr. Marcus Chun," came a voice so calm and measured that it seemed to slow down time itself. "However, I find myself curious about your communication methodology. You have achieved something remarkable in just 37 words." Emma blinked, momentarily thrown off her script. In 2 years of telemarketing, nobody had ever described her sales pitch as remarkable. "I'm sorry, I think I have the wrong number. I was trying to reach Dr. Marcus Chun at the Galactic University Biology Department." "You have reached the Galactic University," the voice replied with the same unhurried cadence. "But you have connected with Dr. Zen Harmony from the Communications Theory Department. And I repeat, your opening statement demonstrates communication techniques that I have been attempting to teach to graduate students for the past 15 years. Emma looked around the telemarketing floor where dozens of other callers were delivering the same scripted pitches to increasingly irritated customers. She was supposed to hang up when she reached wrong numbers and move on to the next call in her queue. "Dr. Harmony, I appreciate your interest, but I should probably—" "Ms. Emma," Dr. Harmony interrupted gently, "may I ask how long you have been practicing professional communication?" "It's not professional communication," Emma said, automatically, falling into the conversational tone she used when dealing with confused customers. "It's just telemarketing. I'm calling people who don't want to talk to me and trying to convince them to buy things they don't need." "Fascinating. You have achieved multi-layered communication efficiency that combines information delivery, relationship establishment, and persuasive framing in a single brief interaction. This is precisely what I have been attempting to teach my students. But they struggle to integrate these elements naturally." Emma found herself actually engaged in the conversation for the first time in months of making calls. "Dr. Harmony, are you saying that telemarketing is ... educational?" "Ms. Emma, I am saying that you appear to have mastered communication techniques through practical application that my graduate students cannot achieve through theoretical study. Would you be willing to participate in a brief experiment?" Emma checked her call metrics on her computer screen. She was supposed to complete 15 calls per hour, and unusual conversations like this one threw off her productivity statistics. But something about Dr. Harmony's genuine curiosity made her want to continue. "What kind of experiment?" "I would like you to explain to me how you approach the challenge of engaging reluctant conversation partners. In academic terms, how do you establish rapport with subjects who are predisposed to terminate communication immediately?" Emma laughed despite herself. "Dr. Harmony, you're asking me to explain how to talk to people who don't want to talk to you." "Precisely. This is the fundamental challenge of effective communication, and you appear to have developed practical solutions that exceed anything in our academic literature." Emma looked around the telemarketing floor again, suddenly seeing her daily routine from a completely different perspective. "Well, the first thing you learn is that most people aren't actually rejecting you personally. They're rejecting the interruption. So you have to acknowledge that you're interrupting them while simultaneously making the interruption feel worthwhile. Continue. Like when I said, "Am I speaking with Dr. Marcus Chun?" I wasn't just asking for identification, I was demonstrating that this wasn't a random call, that I had specific information about the person I was trying to reach. Even though I had the wrong number, you understood that I was making targeted contact rather than just bothering random people. Remarkable. You embedded multiple communication functions into what appeared to be a simple identification request. Emma found herself getting excited about explaining something she'd never really thought about analytically. And the part about premium Interstellar data packages, that wasn't just product information. It was establishing credibility by demonstrating that I understand your communication needs and have solutions that are relevant to your professional context. Ms. Emma, you are describing advanced communication theory concepts that most of my graduate students struggle to understand conceptually, much less apply practically. Really? But this is just basic sales technique. Every telemarketer learns this stuff in the first week. There was another thoughtful pause, and Emma could almost hear Dr. Harmony processing the implications of what she was saying. Ms. Emma, would you be willing to visit my classroom? I believe my students could benefit enormously from learning about practical communication applications from someone with your expertise. Emma felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief. Dr. Harmony, I don't have expertise. I have a high school diploma and 2 years of experience in knowing people on the phone. Your students are probably working on advanced degrees in communication theory. Ms. Emma, my students have extensive theoretical knowledge about communication principles, but they lack practical experience with real-world application under challenging conditions. You have developed skills through daily practice that they cannot acquire through academic study alone. You want me to teach communication theory to university students? I want you to demonstrate practical communication mastery to students who need to understand how theoretical concepts translate into effective real-world interaction. Emma looked at her computer screen, where her call statistics showed that she was already behind her daily quota due to the extended conversation. But Dr. Harmony's offer represented something she'd never imagined possible, the idea that her mundane job might actually involve skills that had academic value. Dr. Harmony, I'm not sure I'm qualified to teach university students anything. Ms. Emma, you have just demonstrated more sophisticated understanding of communication dynamics in 10 minutes of conversation than many of my students develop in entire semesters of coursework. But I don't know the academic terminology or the theoretical frameworks. The theoretical frameworks exist to describe what you already know how to do. You have practical mastery of concepts that my students struggle to understand even when explained through formal academic instruction. Emma made a decision that would either be the most interesting mistake of her career or the beginning of something completely unexpected. Dr. Harmony, when would you want me to visit your class? Ms. Emma, would this afternoon be convenient? I have a graduate seminar on advanced interpersonal communication strategies that would benefit enormously from your practical perspective. As Emma arranged to take the afternoon off from her telemarketing job to visit a university classroom for the first time since high school, she realized that her accidental wrong number had connected her with possibilities she'd never imagined. Sometimes the most important discoveries happened when you are looking for something completely different. Dr. Harmony, I have one question before I hang up. Yes, Ms. Emma? How did you know that my communication approach was sophisticated? I mean, from just one phone call? Ms. Emma, in 15 years of teaching communication theory, I have never encountered a student who could simultaneously establish credibility, acknowledge context, demonstrate relevance, and invite engagement in a 37-word opening statement. You accomplished unconsciously what my graduate students cannot achieve with deliberate effort. Emma hung up the phone and stared at her cubicle, wondering if she'd just discovered that her dead-end job was actually a masterclass in advanced human interaction skills. Maybe being good at talking to people who didn't want to talk to her was more valuable than she'd ever realized. That afternoon, Emma stood outside Lecture Hall 247 at Galactic University, clutching her employee badge from Cosmic Communications and wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Through the door's window, she could see a classroom filled with graduate students from multiple species-tall Regelians with elaborate tentacle arrangements, crystalline Andromedans whose forms refracted the lecture hall's lighting, and several species she couldn't identify, all taking notes on advanced communication theory. Ms. Emma. Dr. Zen Harmony approached from the corridor, and Emma got her first look at the professor, whose phone call had turned her mundane Tuesday into an academic adventure. Dr. Harmony was a Victorian whose sage green skin patterns indicated deep calm and intellectual focus. Their movements had the same measured quality as their voice, creating an immediate sense of tranquility in the busy university environment. Dr. Harmony, I'm starting to think I'm not qualified for this. These are graduate students studying advanced communication theory. I just read scripts to sell phone plans. Ms. Emma, you have mastered practical applications that these students cannot achieve despite extensive theoretical training. That is precisely why your perspective is valuable. Dr. Harmony led Emma into the lecture hall, where the diverse assembly of graduate students looked up with expressions of curiosity mixed with skepticism. Students, I would like to introduce Emma Patel, a professional communication specialist who has agreed to demonstrate practical applications of the theoretical concepts we have been studying. Emma felt her stomach tighten as she realized that Dr. Harmony's introduction made her sound like a legitimate expert rather than a telemarketer who had accidentally dialed the wrong number. Ms. Patel, announced Clicks, a tall Regelian whose tentacles were arranged in patterns that Emma was learning to recognize as academic skepticism. What is your educational background in communication theory? I don't have one, Emma replied. Honestly, I have a high school diploma and 2 years of experience making cold calls for a communications company. The classroom erupted in whispers as the graduate students processed this information. Emma could see expressions that ranged from confusion to dismissal to outright incredulity. Dr. Harmony, said Lixa, an Andromedan whose crystalline features were shifting to colors that indicated professional concern. With respect, how can someone without formal training in communication theory provide meaningful instruction to graduate-level students? An excellent question, Ms. Lixa. Ms. Patel, would you be willing to demonstrate your approach to engaging reluctant communication partners? Perhaps you could attempt to interest one of our skeptical students in a hypothetical service offering? Emma looked around the classroom at the assembly of advanced degree candidates who were clearly questioning her qualifications to be there. This was exactly the kind of hostile audience that 2 years of telemarketing had prepared her to handle. Okay, she said, focusing on Clicks, whose tentacle arrangements suggested he was the most skeptical about her presence. Clicks, I noticed you're studying advanced communication theory. I'm guessing you're probably working on research that requires extensive data collection and analysis across multiple species communication patterns. Clicks's tentacles shifted to a configuration that Emma read as surprised attention. How did you know about my research focus? Because you're a graduate student in a communication theory program, which means you're probably doing original research. And your questions suggest you're thinking critically about methodology and qualification standards. Someone who thinks that carefully about academic credentials is probably working on something that requires systematic data analysis. That's actually an accurate assessment of my research approach. Emma moved closer to Clicks's desk, unconsciously applying the engagement techniques she'd learned from thousands of phone calls. So you're probably dealing with the challenge of getting cooperation from research subjects who see academic interviews as time-consuming interruptions to their daily routines? Yes, that's been a significant obstacle in my data collection efforts. Right. So imagine if I told you that I've spent 2 years learning how to get people to engage in meaningful conversations when they're initially resistant. And that I've developed practical techniques for turning skeptical subjects into willing participants in extended dialogue. The classroom had gone completely quiet as the students watched Emma demonstrate exactly the communication skills she was describing. You're suggesting that telemarketing experience provides relevant training for academic research methodology? Clicks asked, his tentacle arrangements shifting to indicate serious consideration rather than dismissal. I'm suggesting that anyone who can convince strangers to have 15-minute conversations about phone plans they don't need has probably learned something useful about motivating reluctant participants to engage in structured dialogue. Dr. Harmony was watching Emma's demonstration with expressions of satisfaction and vindication. Class, observe that Miss Patel has achieved several communication objectives simultaneously. She established credibility by demonstrating understanding of academic research challenges, created relevance by connecting her experience to specific student needs, and transformed initial skepticism into genuine interest through targeted engagement. Strategies. Lixa, the Andromedan who had questioned Emma's qualifications, was taking detailed notes. Ms. Patel, your approach suggests that practical communication, experience in challenging contexts may provide insights that theoretical training alone cannot achieve. I think it's more like theoretical training gives you the framework for understanding why things work, but practical experience teaches you how to make things work when conditions aren't ideal. Can you provide a specific example? Asked Vex, a Zephyrian whose gaseous form was shifting colors in ways that indicated intense academic curiosity. Sure, in telemarketing, you learn that timing is everything, but you also learn that you can't control timing. So you have to develop techniques for making any timing feel like the right timing. Like, when I called Dr. Harmony this morning, I didn't know if it was a convenient time for conversation, but I structured my opening to make the interruption feel purposeful rather than random. Dr. Harmony nodded approvingly. Ms. Patel is describing adaptive communication strategies that respond to contextual variables rather than relying on controlled conditions. Right, Emma continued, getting more confident as she saw the students' genuine interest. Academic communication training probably teaches you how to have effective conversations when everyone is prepared and willing to participate. But real-world communication requires managing situations where people are distracted, resistant, or actively trying to end the interaction. The students were now taking notes actively, and Emma realized that her practical experience was providing insights that complemented rather than competed with their theoretical knowledge. Ms. Patel, Click said, would you be willing to help me develop strategies for improving response rates in my research interviews? I'd be happy to share what I've learned about engaging reluctant participants, but you'd need to adapt those techniques for academic contexts. Dr. Harmony was documenting the classroom interaction with obvious satisfaction. Students, you are observing the integration of practical expertise with theoretical understanding. Ms. Patel's experience provides real-world validation and application. Methods for concepts you have studied abstractly. But Emma's moment of confidence was interrupted when Dr. Vera Stormwind, the department chair, entered the classroom with the expression that administrators wore when they discovered unauthorized activities. Dr. Harmony, I received reports that you have brought an unqualified instructor into your graduate seminar without departmental approval or proper vetting procedures. The classroom tension shifted as the students realized they were witnessing an administrative confrontation that could have serious implications for both Dr. Harmony and Emma. Dr. Stormwind, Dr. Harmony replied with their characteristic calm. I have invited Ms. Patel to demonstrate practical communication applications that supplement our theoretical curriculum. Dr. Harmony, graduate-level instruction requires qualified professionals with appropriate credentials and departmental authorization. Ms. Patel appears to be a telemarketing employee with no relevant academic background. Emma felt the familiar sinking feeling that came with being dismissed based on her job title rather than her capabilities. But she also felt something new, a protective instinct for the students, who had been genuinely engaged with learning from her practical experience. "Dr. Stormwind," Emma said, "I understand your concern about credentials, but I think there might be value in students learning from people who apply communication skills in challenging real-world contexts. Ms. Patel, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, university instruction requires professional qualifications that ensure appropriate academic standards." Clicks raised his tentacles in the formal pattern that Regelians used for academic intervention. "Dr. Stormwind, respectfully, Ms. Patel has demonstrated communication techniques in the past 30 minutes that have provided more practical insight into engagement strategies than entire semesters of theoretical coursework. That may be, but proper academic protocol requires—" Dr. Stormwind, Lixa interrupted, her crystalline features shifting to colors that indicated determined advocacy. "Ms. Patel has shown us how theoretical concepts translate into practical applications. Isn't that exactly what graduate education is supposed to provide?" Emma looked around the classroom at the students, who were defending her presence despite having initially questioned her qualifications. She realized that something significant had happened during their brief interaction. Mutual recognition that different types of knowledge could complement each other rather than compete. "Dr. Stormwind," Emma said, "I never claimed to be an academic expert. I'm just someone who's learned to be effective at difficult communication challenges. If that's useful to students, great. If not, I can leave right now." Dr. Harmony stepped forward with the measured confidence that Emma was learning to associate with true academic authority. "Dr. Stormwind, Ms. Patel represents exactly the kind of interdisciplinary collaboration that our department has been advocating at our strategic planning initiatives." The administrator was looking around the classroom at students who were clearly engaged and learning, graduate students who were taking notes and asking thoughtful questions, and a collaborative dynamic that was obviously producing positive educational outcomes. "Dr. Harmony, if you wish to continue this collaboration, you will need to submit proper documentation for approval as a guest lecturer series with appropriate oversight and evaluation protocols. Dr. Stormwind, I will gladly provide all necessary documentation to formalize Ms. Patel's contributions to our program." As Dr. Stormwind departed with administrative warnings and bureaucratic requirements, Emma realized that her wrong number had evolved into something much more complex than a simple classroom visit. She was about to become part of an academic experiment that challenged traditional assumptions about expertise, education, and the relationship between practical experience and theoretical knowledge. Whether that was an opportunity or a disaster remained to be seen. 3 weeks into what had officially become the Industry Academic Communication Exchange Program, Emma discovered that teaching university students was both easier and harder than making cold calls to reluctant customers. The students were genuinely interested in learning, but they also asked questions that forced her to think analytically about techniques she'd always used instinctively. "Emma," said Dr. Zen Harmony during one of their Tuesday afternoon planning sessions, "I have been observing your interactions with the students, and I am curious about something. You consistently achieve rapport with individuals who initially express skepticism about your qualifications, but you accomplish this without compromising your authenticity or credentials." Emma looked up from the notes she'd been preparing for Thursday's seminar on cross-cultural communication under pressure, a topic she'd never imagined she was qualified to teach until Dr. Harmony pointed out that she'd been doing exactly that for 2 years. "What do you mean?" "When students question your lack of formal training, you acknowledge their concern directly rather than becoming defensive. But you then demonstrate competence through performance rather than through claims about your abilities." Emma had been spending enough time around academic language to recognize that Dr. Harmony was analyzing her teaching methods with the same systematic attention they brought to research. Dr. Harmony, I think that's just honesty? Like, I can't pretend to have credentials I don't have, but I can show people what I actually know how to do. But many people in your situation would attempt to inflate their qualifications or minimize the validity of their questioner's concerns. You neither defend nor diminish. You simply redirect attention to practical demonstration. Emma was beginning to understand that Dr. Harmony's calm, analytical observations were actually a form of teaching. By articulating the principles behind her instinctive behaviors, they were helping her understand her own expertise in ways she'd never considered. I guess in telemarketing, you learn really quickly that people can detect bullshit. If you try to pretend you're something you're not, they'll hang up immediately. But if you're honest about what you're offering and confident about its value, they'll at least listen long enough to make an informed decision. Fascinating. You have developed authenticity as a strategic communication tool rather than just a personal value. Their conversation was interrupted by Clicks, whose research project on cross-species communication barriers had improved dramatically since he'd started applying Emma's engagement techniques. Emma, Dr. Harmony, I have a problem that I hope you can help me solve. Emma had learned that when Clicks said, I have a problem, he usually meant, I've discovered something interesting that challenges my previous assumptions. What's the problem? I've been using Emma's rapport-building techniques in my research interviews, and they're working remarkably well. Too well, actually. My subjects are so comfortable with the interaction that they're providing much more detailed and personal information than my research protocols anticipated. Dr. Harmony's skin patterns shifted to the configuration Emma had learned indicated intense professional interest. Explain the complications, Clicks. My original research design assumed that subjects would provide brief, cautious responses that could be analyzed for communication pattern indicators. But Emma's techniques have created interview environments where subjects share complex personal narratives that provide much richer data than I expected. Emma looked at Clicks's research notes, which had expanded from simple response categorizations to detailed transcripts of extended conversations. That sounds like a good problem to have. It would be, except that my thesis committee expects analysis based on the original research methodology. The data I'm collecting doesn't fit the analytical framework I proposed. Dr. Harmony was reviewing Clicks's interview transcripts with growing excitement. Clicks, what you have discovered is that effective communication techniques produce qualitatively different data than standard academic interview protocols. This could represent a significant methodological advancement for communication research. But your thesis may need to evolve to accommodate the breakthrough discoveries that your improved methodology has produced. Emma said, applying the same problem-solving approach she used when customers' needs didn't match the services her company offered. I don't understand what you mean. In sales, when you discover that customers actually need something different from what you originally thought you were selling, you don't force them to fit your original product offering. You adapt your approach to provide what they actually need. Dr. Harmony was documenting this conversation with the enthusiasm Emma had learned to associate with academic inspiration. Emma, you are describing adaptive research methodology that responds to emerging data rather than constraining data to fit predetermined analytical frameworks. I'm describing customer service. When you find out what people actually want or need, you adjust your approach to serve them better. Clicks's tentacle arrangements shifted to patterns Emma was learning indicated sudden understanding. So instead of trying to force my rich narrative data into simple categorization analysis, I should develop analytical methods that can handle complex qualitative information? Why not? Emma asked. You've discovered that people will share detailed, meaningful information if you create the right communication environment. That seems like a more interesting finding than whatever you were originally planning to measure. Over the following weeks, Emma found herself consulting on multiple student research projects that had produced unexpected results through the application of her practical communication techniques. But the most challenging consultation came from an unexpected source. Ms. Patel, announced Dr. Vera Stormwind, the department chair, who had originally questioned Emma's qualifications. I would like to request your assistance with a departmental challenge. Emma looked up from her desk in the small office that Dr. Harmony had arranged for her guest lecturer position, surprised to see the administrator who had initially opposed her involvement with the program. Dr. Stormwind, how can I help you? We have received complaints from several professors that student engagement in their courses has declined significantly this semester. Students are attending classes but participating minimally in discussions and showing reduced interest in course material. And you think this might be related to communication issues? I think this might be related to the fact that students have experienced highly engaging instruction in your seminars and are now finding traditional lecture formats less stimulating. Emma felt a mixture of pride and concern. Dr. Stormwind, are you saying that my teaching methods are making other professors look bad? I am saying that your teaching methods are demonstrating engagement possibilities that our traditional approaches have not achieved. The students who participate in your seminars ask more questions, contribute more actively to discussions, and show greater curiosity about practical applications of theoretical concepts. So what would you like me to do about it? Dr. Stormwind consulted her administrative tablet with the expression of someone who was about to make a request that challenged her own assumptions about proper academic protocol. Ms. Patel, would you be willing to conduct workshops for our faculty on engagement? Techniques that could be adapted for traditional academic instruction? Emma stared at Dr. Stormwind, trying to process the idea that she was being asked to teach communication skills to university professors. Dr. Stormwind, these are people with doctoral degrees and years of teaching experience. I'm not sure I'm qualified to train professional educators. Ms. Patel, you have achieved student engagement levels that many of our most experienced professors struggle to attain. Your techniques produce results that our traditional methods do not. But I don't know anything about curriculum design or educational theory or learning objectives. You know how to make people interested in information they didn't initially want to receive. That is precisely the challenge that every educator faces. Emma realized that Dr. Stormwind was describing her telemarketing experience as a form of educational expertise that had direct applications to university teaching. Dr. Stormwind, I'd be willing to share what I've learned about engagement techniques, but the professors would need to adapt those approaches for their specific academic contexts. Agreed. Would you be available to conduct faculty development workshops next month? As Dr. Stormwind departed with preliminary scheduling arrangements, Emma reflected on how her accidental wrong number had evolved into increasingly complex professional opportunities. Dr. Harmony, she said during their next planning session, I'm starting to feel like I'm in over my head. 3 weeks ago, I was making cold calls about phone plans. Now I'm supposed to train university professors about student engagement? Dr. Harmony's calm presence had become a source of stability as Emma navigated the unfamiliar world of academic collaboration. Emma, you are experiencing the natural progression that occurs when practical expertise encounters theoretical knowledge. Your contributions have demonstrated value that extends beyond the original context in which they were developed. But what if I can't deliver what people are expecting? What if my techniques only work in specific situations and don't translate to different educational contexts? Then you will learn from that experience and adapt your approach accordingly. That is exactly what you have been teaching our students to do: remain authentic while adjusting methods to serve different audiences and objectives. Emma looked around her temporary office, decorated with notes from students whose research projects had improved through the application of practical communication techniques. Thank you messages from professors who had attended her engagement. Workshops and academic papers that cited her contributions to communication methodology research. Dr. Harmony, when you first invited me to visit your classroom, did you expect all of this to happen? Emma, I expected to provide my students with a brief demonstration of practical communication applications. I did not expect to discover that your expertise would contribute to fundamental reconsiderations of how we approach education, research methodology, and the relationship between academic theory and real-world practice. So we're both learning. As we go, we are both discovering possibilities that neither of us anticipated when we began this collaboration. As Emma prepared for faculty workshops that would challenge university professors to reconsider their assumptions about student engagement and educational effectiveness, she realized that her greatest skill wasn't telemarketing technique or communication strategy. Her greatest skill was the ability to remain authentic while adapting to unexpected situations, to learn from every interaction, and to treat each conversation as an opportunity to discover something new about how people connect with each other. Sometimes, the most important expertise was simply being willing to listen carefully and respond honestly, regardless of the context or audience. 6 weeks into her unexpected academic career, Emma faced her biggest challenge yet, a faculty development workshop series that Dr. Stormwind had requested was attracting attention from educators throughout the Galactic University system. What had started as a solution to student engagement problems at one institution was evolving into a potential revolution in educational methodology. Emma, Dr. Harmony announced during their Monday morning planning session, I have received communications from 17 universities requesting information about our industry academic communication exchange program. The interest extends across multiple species and educational systems. Emma looked at the messages displayed on Dr. Harmony's holographic interface formal inquiries from Rigelian Technical Institutes, Andromedan Arts Academies, and educational institutions from species she'd never heard of, all wanting to understand how a telemarketer had improved university student engagement by 340%. Dr. Harmony, this is getting really complicated. I developed these techniques for selling phone plans to people who didn't want them. I don't know if they'll work for teaching quantum physics to Zephyrian graduate students. Emma, that uncertainty is precisely why the broader educational community is interested in your methodology. You have demonstrated that effective communication principles may be more universal than we previously understood. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Magnus Thoughtweaver, director of the Galactic Education Consortium, whose presence at their small university indicated that Emma's work had attracted the highest levels of academic attention. Ms. Patel, Dr. Harmony, Dr. Thoughtweaver announced with the formal bearing that Emma was learning to associate with very important academic officials. I have come to evaluate claims that your communication methodology has achieved unprecedented improvements in educational outcomes. Emma felt the familiar anxiety that came with being evaluated by people whose qualifications far exceeded her own. Dr. Thoughtweaver, I want to make sure you understand that I'm not an education expert. I'm a telemarketing specialist who accidentally discovered that some sales techniques seem to work in classroom settings. Ms. Patel, we have documented evidence that your techniques have improved student engagement rates across multiple disciplines, enhanced research methodology outcomes, and increased faculty teaching effectiveness. These results suggest applications that extend far beyond individual institutional improvements. Dr. Harmony was displaying the statistical documentation they'd compiled over 6 weeks of implementation. Numbers that Emma still found hard to believe represented her influence on academic outcomes. Dr. Thoughtweaver, what kind of evaluation are you planning to conduct? We want to observe your methodology in action, interview students and faculty who have participated in your programs, and assess the scalability of your approach for implementation across diverse educational contexts. Emma looked around her temporary office, which had become mission control for educational experiments she'd never intended to start. Student research projects, faculty testimonials, and academic papers citing. Her contributions covered every available surface. Dr. Thoughtweaver, I'm willing to demonstrate what I do, but I want to be clear about something important. What is that, Miss Patel? My techniques work because they're authentic responses to real communication challenges. If you try to turn them into standardized protocols or institutional requirements, they'll probably stop working. Dr. Thoughtweaver consulted his evaluation documentation with expressions of professional curiosity. Explain your reasoning, Miss Patel. In telemarketing, you learn that scripts only work if you understand why they work. The words aren't magic. It's the intention behind the words that creates connection with people. If professors start using engagement techniques because they're required to, instead of because they genuinely want to connect with students, the techniques will feel artificial and manipulative. So you're suggesting that your methodology cannot be systematized for broad implementation? I'm suggesting that the methodology has to be adapted by each person for their specific situation and authentic communication style. You can teach the principles, but each person has to find their own way of applying them genuinely. Dr. Harmony was documenting this conversation with growing excitement. Emma, you are describing educational philosophy that prioritizes authentic relationship building over standardized technique implementation. Over the following week, Dr. Thoughtweaver observed Emma's seminars, interviewed students about their learning experiences, and consulted with faculty members who had attended her engagement workshops. But the most challenging part of his evaluation came during a formal presentation to the university's Board of Trustees. Ms. Patel, announced Chancellor Aurora Starbright, the board has reviewed Dr. Thoughtweaver's preliminary assessment, and we are impressed by the documented improvements in educational outcomes. However, we have concerns about the sustainability and replicability of your approach. Emma found herself standing before an assembly of academic administrators, government officials, and educational policymakers whose decisions would affect millions of students across the galaxy. Chancellor Starbright, what specific concerns would you like me to address? Ms. Patel, your methods appear to be highly dependent on your individual personality and communication style. If your approach cannot be taught to other educators or adapted for different cultural contexts, then its impact will be limited to your direct involvement. That's a fair concern, but I think the solution is to focus on teaching the principles behind the techniques rather than the specific techniques themselves. Explain what you mean. Emma looked around the boardroom at the assembled officials, applying the same analytical approach she used when trying to understand difficult customers. The principle behind all my techniques is genuine curiosity about what people actually need, combined with honest communication about what I can offer. Everything else, specific words, timing, presentation style, is just adaptation to different circumstances. Board member Dr. Vex Stormwind leaned forward with interest. So you're saying that effective communication is about authentic relationship building rather than technique mastery? I'm saying that techniques only work when they serve genuine relationship building. People can detect when you're using communication strategies to manipulate them versus when you're using communication skills to understand and serve them better. Chancellor Starbright was reviewing Emma's documentation with growing concern. Ms. Patel, that philosophy is difficult to quantify. For assessment purposes, how do we measure authentic relationship building or evaluate genuine curiosity? The same way you measure any educational outcome, by looking at results. Are students more engaged? Are they learning more effectively? Are they developing better communication skills themselves? Are faculty members more satisfied with their teaching experiences? Dr. Thoughtweaver consulted his evaluation data, Ms. Patel, the quantitative results are impressive. Student engagement has improved by an average of 73%, course completion. Rates have increased by 45%, and faculty satisfaction with teaching experiences has risen by 58%. These outcomes suggest that your approach produces measurable educational benefits. But, Chancellor Starbright interjected, we need to understand how to replicate these results without requiring Ms. Patel's personal involvement in every educational implementation. Emma realized that the board was facing the same challenge that every organization encountered when trying to scale personalized services: how to maintain effectiveness while expanding reach. Chancellor Starbright, maybe the question isn't how to replicate exactly what I do, but how to help other educators develop their own authentic approaches to student engagement. I don't understand the distinction. Well, when I train new telemarketers, I don't teach them to copy my exact script word for word. I teach them the principles of engagement, then help them develop their own communication style that feels genuine to them. Board member Dr. Lyra Brightwater was taking detailed notes about Emma's training philosophy. Ms. Patel, are you suggesting that effective education requires individualized teaching approaches rather than standardized methodologies? I'm suggesting that effective education requires authentic relationships between teachers and students. The specific methods for building those relationships will vary depending on the teacher's personality, the student's needs, and the subject matter being taught. Dr. Harmony stepped forward to support Emma's explanation. Board members, Ms. Patel has demonstrated that communication effectiveness emerges from genuine understanding of audience needs rather than from technique mastery. This principle can be taught and adapted across different educational contexts. But their discussion was interrupted by an unexpected complication. Dr. Regina Coldwell from the Traditional Education Standards Authority entered the boardroom with the expression that Emma had learned to associate with institutional opposition. Chancellor Starbright, board members, I must express serious concerns about the experimental programs being conducted at this institution. Emma felt her stomach sink as she realized that their innovative approach to education had attracted critics, as well as supporters. Dr. Coldwell, what specific concerns would you like to address? Ms. Patel's methods undermine established educational hierarchies by suggesting that individuals without proper academic credentials can provide effective instruction to university students. This precedent threatens the integrity of higher education standards. The boardroom tension shifted as the assembled officials realized they were witnessing a fundamental debate about the nature of educational expertise and institutional authority. Dr. Coldwell, Emma said, I've never claimed to be more qualified than professors with advanced degrees and years of teaching experience. I've just shared practical techniques that seem to help with student engagement. Ms. Patel, your presence in university classrooms sends the message that formal education and professional training are less important than personal charisma and sales techniques. Or it sends the message that different types of knowledge can complement each other to create better educational outcomes. Emma replied, feeling defensive but trying to remain calm. Dr. Thoughtweaver was documenting this exchange with obvious interest in how Emma would respond to direct challenges to her legitimacy. Dr. Coldwell, Emma continued, I think there's room in education for both academic expertise and practical experience. Professors bring theoretical knowledge, research skills, and years of specialized training. I bring experience with engaging reluctant audiences and adapting communication styles to different situations. Students benefit from both perspectives. But where does this integration end, Ms. Patel? Should we invite taxi drivers to teach transportation engineering? Should we ask restaurant servers to instruct hospitality management courses? Emma realized that Dr. Coldwell was using reductio ad absurdum arguments to dismiss the value of practical expertise in educational settings. Dr. Coldwell, if a taxi driver had developed innovative techniques for safe urban navigation that could improve transportation engineering outcomes, wouldn't it be worth listening to their insights? If a restaurant server had mastered customer service approaches that could enhance hospitality management training, wouldn't that knowledge be valuable? Ms. Patel, academic standards exist to ensure that instruction meets professional quality requirements. And student outcomes exist to measure whether instruction actually works. If academic standards are producing lower engagement and effectiveness than alternative approaches, maybe we should examine whether the standards are serving students or just protecting institutional traditions. The boardroom fell silent as Emma realized she had just challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying university education. Hierarchy. Chancellor Starbright was reviewing the statistical documentation with expressions that suggested she was weighing institutional politics against educational effectiveness. Ms. Patel, Dr. Coldwell, both perspectives raise important considerations. However, our primary responsibility is to serve student learning needs rather than defend institutional conventions. Dr. Coldwell was preparing additional arguments when the Clix entered the boardroom with several other graduate students whose research projects had been transformed through Emma's communication techniques. Chancellor Starbright, board members respectfully, we request permission to address Dr. Coldwell's concerns about educational standards. Proceed, Mr. Clix. Dr. Coldwell, we are graduate students who have experienced both traditional academic instruction and Ms. Patel's engagement methods. We can document specific ways that practical communication training has enhanced rather than undermined our academic development. Emma watched as her students, she still felt surprised that she could think of them that way, began advocating for educational approaches that integrated practical and theoretical knowledge. Ms. Patel's techniques have improved our research methodology, enhanced our ability to communicate complex ideas to diverse audiences, and increased our confidence in applying theoretical knowledge to real-world challenges. Clix continued. Lixa, the Andromedan student who had initially questioned Emma's qualifications, added her support. Dr. Coldwell, Ms. Patel's instruction has made us better students, not less rigorous scholars. We approach academic work with greater curiosity, more effective communication skills, and deeper understanding of how theoretical concepts translate into practical applications. Dr. Coldwell was faced with student testimony that contradicted her arguments about declining educational standards. Students, while I appreciate your positive experiences, individual satisfaction does not constitute evidence of educational quality. Then let's look at the quantitative evidence, Dr. Thoughtweaver interjected, displaying the comprehensive evaluation data he'd compiled. Student performance has improved across multiple measurable categories. Research quality has increased. Faculty teaching effectiveness ratings have risen significantly. As the debate continued between proponents of educational innovation and defenders of institutional tradition, Emma realized that her accidental wrong number had created a conflict that went far beyond individual teaching methods. They were arguing about fundamental questions. What constituted educational expertise? How should institutions balance tradition with effectiveness? Could practical knowledge contribute meaningfully to academic environments? The answers would determine not just Emma's future involvement with the university, but the possibilities available to students throughout the Galactic education system. The boardroom debate had reached an impasse between Dr. Coldwell's institutional traditionalism and the documented evidence of Emma's educational effectiveness when Chancellor Starbright made a decision that surprised everyone present. We're going to conduct a real-time demonstration, she announced. Ms. Patel, Dr. Coldwell, you will each present the same educational content to comparable student groups. We'll measure engagement, comprehension, and student satisfaction to determine which approach produces superior outcomes. Emma felt a surge of panic. Chancellor Starbright, I'm not sure that's a fair comparison. Dr. Coldwell has years of experience with formal academic presentation, and I've never taught traditional university content. Ms. Patel, you have consistently maintained that your techniques can enhance any educational context. This demonstration will test that claim under controlled conditions. Dr. Coldwell accepted the challenge with the confidence of someone whose entire career had been built on traditional academic authority. I welcome the opportunity to demonstrate the superiority of established educational methodologies. 2 hours later, Emma found herself in Lecture Hall A, facing 30 undergraduate students from the Comparative Communication Studies program, while Dr. Coldwell prepared to address an identical group in Lecture Hall B. Both would be presenting the same content: theoretical foundations of cross-species communication. Emma looked at her assigned topic outline dense academic material about communication theory frameworks, species-specific interaction patterns, and formal linguistic analysis, and realized she had no choice but to apply her practical experience to completely unfamiliar subject matter. Good afternoon, she began, abandoning the formal introduction she'd planned and reverting to the authentic approach that had worked in every other challenging situation she'd encountered. I'm Emma Patel, and I have a confession to make. 3 months ago, I'd never heard of theoretical communication frameworks. I learned about them because a wrong number connected me with Dr. Harmony, and I got curious about why my telemarketing techniques seemed to work in academic settings. The students were immediately attentive, not because of her credentials, but because she'd created genuine curiosity about how her story connected to their coursework. So today, instead of pretending to be an expert on communication theory, I want to explore these concepts with you by figuring out how they explain things we already understand about talking to each other. Emma moved away from the lecture podium and positioned herself among the students, unconsciously applying the engagement techniques she'd developed through thousands of phone conversations. Let's start with something everyone in this room has experienced: trying to explain something important to someone who doesn't seem to be listening. Can anyone give me an example? Hands went up immediately as students shared frustrating communication experiences trying to convince parents about career choices, explaining human customs to alien roommates, attempting to clarify assignment requirements with confused professors. Perfect, Emma said, writing their examples on the whiteboard. Now, according to your textbook, these situations involve theoretical frameworks for cross-species communication. But what does that actually mean? She guided the students through analysis of their own experiences, using the academic terminology they were supposed to learn, but framing complex concepts as explanations for communication challenges they'd already encountered. When Maria tried to explain human dating customs to her Rigelian roommate, she was dealing with what the textbook calls species-specific interaction patterns. But from Maria's perspective, she was just trying to help her friend understand why humans sometimes say the opposite of what they mean when they're nervous. The theoretical content became accessible because Emma connected it to practical experiences that the students could relate to personally. The academic framework gives us vocabulary for understanding what we're doing when we communicate across species barriers. But the framework only matters if it helps us communicate more effectively in situations like the ones you've described. By the end of the 50-minute session, the students had covered all the required theoretical content, but they'd learned it through analysis of their own communication experiences rather than through memorization of abstract principles. Meanwhile, in Lecture Hall B, Dr. Coldwell was delivering a methodical presentation that covered the same material through traditional academic methodology formal definitions, historical development of theoretical frameworks, and systematic categorization of cross-species communication variables. The evaluation results were available within hours of both presentations. Ms. Patel, Chancellor Starbright announced to the reassembled Board of Trustees, Your students scored an average of 23% higher on content comprehension assessments than Dr. Coldwell's students. They also reported significantly higher levels of engagement and expressed greater confidence in applying the theoretical concepts to real-world situations. Emma felt vindicated, but also sympathetic to Dr. Coldwell, whose professional expertise had been publicly challenged. Chancellor Starbright, I want to emphasize that Dr. Coldwell's approach provided students with important theoretical foundations that my approach built on. The most effective education probably combines both methodologies. Dr. Coldwell looked at Emma with an expression that combined professional respect with personal puzzlement. Ms. Patel, I must acknowledge that your techniques achieved superior educational outcomes. However, I remain concerned about the implications for academic standards and institutional integrity. Dr. Coldwell, what if we viewed this as an opportunity to enhance academic standards rather than abandon them? What if practical communication techniques could make theoretical content more accessible and applicable? Dr. Harmony, who had been observing both presentations, stepped forward with documentation that addressed Dr. Coldwell's concerns directly. Colleagues, I have been analyzing the educational methodology that Ms. Patel demonstrated today. Her approach maintains rigorous academic content standards while improving delivery effectiveness and student comprehension. Explain your analysis, Dr. Harmony. Ms. Patel covered 100% of the required theoretical content with the same level of conceptual sophistication as traditional academic presentation. But she also provided practical application contexts that helped students understand how abstract concepts relate to real-world communication challenges. Chancellor Starbright was reviewing the comparative assessment data with obvious interest in the educational implications. Dr. Harmony, are you suggesting that Ms. Patel's methodology represents enhancement rather than replacement of academic instruction? I am suggesting that Ms. Patel has demonstrated integration of academic rigor with practical relevance in ways that serve students more effectively than either approach could achieve independently. Dr. Thoughtweaver was documenting the demonstration results for his Galactic Education Consortium evaluation. Ms. Patel, your presentation today suggests that your techniques can be applied to traditional academic content without compromising educational standards. Dr. Thoughtweaver, I think the key is understanding that engagement techniques and academic content aren't competing approaches. They're complementary components of effective education. Dr. Coldwell was processing the evaluation results with visible internal conflict between her institutional loyalties and the documented evidence of superior student outcomes. Ms. Patel, if your approach produces better educational results, then my opposition was based on false assumptions about the relationship between teaching methods and academic quality. Dr. Coldwell, maybe we were both partially right. Academic expertise provides essential content knowledge and practical communication. Skills enhance delivery effectiveness. Students benefit most when they have access to both. Chancellor Starbright was consulting with other board members before announcing a decision that would affect educational policy throughout the university system. Ms. Patel, Dr. Coldwell, based on today's demonstration, the board has decided to authorize development of integrated educational programming that combines academic expertise with practical communication training. Emma felt relief mixed with excitement about the possibilities this decision represented. Chancellor Starbright, what would integrated programming involve? Ms. Patel, we want to create faculty development programs that teach engagement techniques to traditional academic instructors, while also providing content expertise training to practitioners with valuable real-world experience. Dr. Coldwell was nodding with growing enthusiasm. Chancellor Starbright, that approach would preserve academic standards while incorporating communication effectiveness enhancements. Dr. Coldwell, would you be willing to collaborate with Ms. Patel on developing curriculum that integrates both Methodologies? Chancellor Starbright, I would be honored to contribute to educational innovation that serves students more effectively. As the board session concluded with authorization for the most comprehensive educational methodology reform in the university's history, Emma realized that her wrong number had accomplished something she'd never imagined possible. She hadn't just found a new career or discovered hidden talents. She'd participated in demonstrating that different types of expertise could work together to create educational approaches that served students better than traditional methods alone. Sometimes the most revolutionary changes emerged from the simplest insight that the goal wasn't to determine which approach was superior, but to find ways for different approaches to complement each other in service of shared objectives. The academic framework provided essential knowledge. The practical techniques enhanced delivery effectiveness. Students deserved both. 1 year after Emma Patel's accidental wrong number, Galactic University had become the leading research center for integrated educational methodology, with over 200 institutions throughout the known galaxy, implementing programs based on the collaboration between academic expertise and practical communication skills. The waiting list for our Faculty Development Integration Program now extends to 8 months. Emma told the assembled delegates at the Interstellar Education Innovation Summit, addressing an audience that included university presidents, education, ministers, and teaching professionals from 47 different worlds. What began as a mistake calling the wrong number while trying to sell premium data packages has evolved into educational methodology that's being implemented in institutions, serving over 12 million students across the galaxy. Emma clicked to her presentation slide, showing statistical outcomes from 12 months of integrated educational programming student engagement rates that exceeded traditional methods by an average of 67%, course completion improvements of 43%, and faculty satisfaction increases of 59%. But the most important discovery wasn't about teaching techniques or communication strategies. The most important discovery was that educational effectiveness improves dramatically when we stop treating academic expertise and practical experience as competing approaches and start using them as complementary resources. In the audience, Dr. Xing Harmony watched Emma with the calm satisfaction that came from witnessing a collaboration achieve impact far beyond its original scope. The professor had become co-director of the Integrated Educational Research Center, where they documented how practical communication skills could enhance rather than replace academic instruction. Dr. Coldwell, who had transformed from skeptical opponent to enthusiastic collaborator, now served as Director of Academic Standards Integration, ensuring that innovative teaching methods maintain rigorous content quality while improving delivery effectiveness. Dr. Emma Patel announced Supreme Education Coordinator Nova Starbright from the Galactic Education Authority. On behalf of educators throughout known space, we want to express our gratitude for your contributions to what historians are calling the fourth renaissance of educational innovation. Emma smiled at the formal recognition, but her real satisfaction came from the messages she received daily from students whose learning experiences had been transformed by teachers who understood that engagement and rigor could work together rather than compete. Coordinator Starbright, the most important outcome isn't the statistical improvements or the institutional recognition. It's the demonstration that breakthrough innovation emerges from combining different types of knowledge rather than defending traditional boundaries between expertise categories. After the presentation, Emma was approached by educators, policymakers, and communication specialists who wanted to understand how to apply integrated methodology to challenges beyond university instruction. But the conversation that mattered most came from Dr. Harmony herself, who had evolved from accidental phone call recipient to research partner in exploring the intersection between theoretical knowledge and practical application. Emma, Doctor, Harmony said as they walked through the expanded research center that now occupied most of Galactic University's Communication Studies building. I have been reflecting on our collaboration, and I realize that you taught me something more valuable than practical communication techniques. What's that? You taught me that academic expertise becomes most meaningful when it serves people who can use that knowledge to solve real-world problems, rather than when it exists primarily to impress other academics. They paused beside the memorial display Emma had created to honor Accidental Discoveries, a collection of stories about breakthroughs that had emerged from mistakes, wrong numbers, and unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated fields. Dr. Harmony, you taught me that practical experience becomes most valuable when it's understood through theoretical frameworks that explain why techniques work and how they can be adapted to different situations. And that integration produces results that neither approach could achieve independently? Their conversation was interrupted by a group of young educators from the Interspecies Teacher Training Academy, who approached with the enthusiasm Emma had learned to associate with. People who were discovering that education was more creative and collaborative than they'd expected. Dr. Patel, Professor Harmony, called out Zara, a recent graduate whose multicultural teaching certification reflected the integrated approach that had emerged from their collaboration. We've been working on applying your methodology to early childhood education, and we think we figured out how to adapt engagement techniques for teaching basic concepts to multi-species kindergarten classes. Emma felt the familiar surge of satisfaction that came from watching young professionals discover that innovation emerged from combining different perspectives rather than following established protocols. That's wonderful, Zara. What made you think of applying integrated methodology to early childhood education? Well, you always say that effective communication starts with understanding what your audience actually needs rather than what you think they should need. Kindergarten students from different species have completely different learning styles, attention spans, and cultural backgrounds. Traditional teaching methods try to make all students adapt to standardized approaches, but integrated methodology helps teachers adapt their approaches to serve diverse student needs. Dr. Harmony was documenting this conversation with the appreciation Emma recognized as deep satisfaction with educational success that extended their collaborative insights to new populations and challenges. Zara, you have identified integration, applications that neither Emma nor I had considered. That represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking that advances educational understanding beyond our individual discoveries. As the students continued describing their research project with the enthusiasm of young professionals who had learned that their diverse backgrounds were valuable to advanced educational practice, Emma realized that their most lasting impact wouldn't be measured in institutional changes or statistical improvements. Their most lasting impact would be the generation of educators who had learned that effective teaching required both theoretical knowledge and practical wisdom. That innovation emerged from collaboration between different types of expertise, and that the goal of education was serving student learning needs rather than defending institutional traditions. Emma, Dr. Harmony said as they concluded their conversation with the students, I want to tell you something I have never said to a research collaborator. What's that? Thank you. Not for the professional recognition or the educational breakthroughs, but for demonstrating that the most meaningful academic work emerges from genuine curiosity about practical applications rather than from purely theoretical investigation. Emma looked around the research center, where educators from dozens of species were engaged in collaborative projects that combined academic rigor with real-world relevance, where students were conducting research that addressed both theoretical questions and practical challenges, where the artificial boundary between academic and practical knowledge had been replaced by integrated approaches that served both objectives. Dr. Harmony, I think we discovered something more important than educational methodology or communication techniques. What did we discover? We discovered that when people with different types of expertise approach each other with genuine curiosity, rather than competitive defensiveness, they can solve problems that seemed impossible when they were working within isolated specializations. You mean that academic knowledge and practical experience are more powerful when they're combined rather than separated? I mean that every person knows something valuable about how the world works, and the most important breakthroughs happen when people are willing to learn from each other instead of defending their own areas of expertise. 2 years after her wrong number changed everything, Emma Patel had become a symbol of what the Galactic education community called integrated learning, the recognition that breakthrough innovation required collaboration between theoretical knowledge and practical experience. But more importantly, she had remained someone who approached every conversation with genuine curiosity about what she could learn from the person on the other end of the line. Whether that person was a reluctant telemarketing prospect, a brilliant university professor, or anyone else who had something interesting to share. Sometimes changing how entire civilizations approached education was less about developing new teaching techniques and more about rediscovering an ancient insight that everyone knew something worth learning. And the most important skill was knowing how to listen carefully enough to discover what that something was. The communication theory was just the framework. The curiosity was the foundation.